I know you're gonna dig this.
This is Rhine McLin, host of the Funk Music Hall of Fame and Exhibition Center's award-winning show, Funk Chronicles, recorded live here at DATV Studios in Dayton, Ohio. And now, Skyping in all the way from Jacksonville, Florida, is Richard Boyce, original member of Parliament. Hello, Richard. How are you?
Hello, and how are you?
I am doing good, and I am just so excited to do this interview with you.
Well, I'm excited speaking with you. I see you all the time on Facebook and in news articles. I'm very glad to meet you.
It is my pleasure. Now, I want to get right into it. Tell me, where were you born, and where were you raised? And then tell me how you met the beginning of your music career.
Well, I was born in Greensboro, North Carolina. Though when I tell folks I'm from Greensboro, North Carolina, my wife says, well, you were born there, but you're not from there. Because my family took us away to Scranton, Pennsylvania. That was, back during the migration back in the 40s and 50s, we all moved north. So we stayed in Scranton, Pennsylvania for a while. Then we ended up in Manville, New Jersey as a young child. And then from Manville, we moved to the home of the P-Funk, Plainfield, New Jersey.
Home of the P-Funk. Okay.
Yeah.
So tell me, how did you start being interested in music? And you and your brother Frankie started at an early age playing. So tell me about how you got started with instruments and playing music.
Well, we were raised in the church. Growing up in the church, my dad was a gospel singer. He sang gospel for many years with many groups. One group in particular was the Carnation Singers. And they used to bring in groups like the Dixie Hummingbirds and the Drinker Singers who had Sissy Houston in it, things like that on their programs in New Brunswick. My mom sang, she had a group, and they both sang in the choir. So we grew up in the music and just growing up around the music. And then, of course, we were watching people like Little Richard, Fats Dominoes, Jerry Lee Lewis, Elvis Presley, you name it. One of my favorite artists, probably people we even forgot about, was Larry Williams. He made the song Bonnie Maroney. I got a girl named Bonnie Maroney. And just watching them was like the training ground that got us started. And of course, my dad, he eventually sang with a group that was a spinoff of the Soul Seekers. And the Soul Seekers were very popular. They had a guitar player who I'd love to mention. His name was Wallace Myers. And he used to come around the house all the time. And he would show my brother chords. Well, we got guitars for Christmas. I must have been about 9, 10 years old. And when we got our guitars for Christmas, actually my brother Frankie, he started playing. He was very serious. I was still out playing marbles and what have you, playing cowboys and Indians. He took the guitar very serious. But we both started out playing guitar.
Well,
but then
who taught you? Who taught you?
Sorry?
Who taught you how to play?
Well, that's just it. Wallace Myers was teaching Frankie how to play. And then when I realized that Frankie was getting good at it, I started playing the guitar, and Frankie would show me stuff. And then I ended up playing with another group out of New Brunswick, the Happy Land Singers. But what happened was we ended up on the same program one day. We couldn't have been no more than maybe 12 years old or so. And they just kicked us in the you know what. So I decided to go with my brother and my dad. And so I had to switch over to bass because he was already playing the guitar and only had 4 strings. So I just went from there and just watching all the gospel groups back in the day. I mean, the first bass I ever saw was the Soul Stirrers. And that just fascinated me at a very young age. When I saw this guy playing a bass guitar, I had never seen it before. I was just like, wow. I couldn't believe that was another instrument, because I remember the days when guitars weren't even prevalent in the gospel field at that time. They were still singing a cappella.
Yes. Now, so when you at that point in time, we're going to fast forward. So when you get to high school, where are you in your music career?
Well, what happened was we, like I said, the Soul Seekers were very popular, and what happened was the Reverend Hannah, who just passed away, God rest his soul, he was very influential in the group. They knew about my brothers and I, and to my dad's disappointment, they asked us to go on the road with them. We were like 16. I was 16, Frankie was 15. We went on the road with the Soul Seekers, traveling up and down the East Coast. I mean, and we were playing places like the Boston Arena, the Met in Philadelphia, the Newark Stadium, Symphony Hall. And then we ended up recording our first album with the Soul Seekers, Songs for My Mother. So that really got us started, because we were out there, you know, with the best. Like I said, we were out there with groups like the Five Blind Boys, both sets, Mississippi, Alabama, Williams Brothers, the Clouds, all of them. And Frankie, he just got so good at playing the guitar, so that made me even want to play more. And of course, we would go to the Apollo Theater. I don't exactly remember the price, but it was pretty, well, I can't say cheap, because, you know, for that time it wasn't cheap. But we would go to the Apollo, sit on the front row, and we would watch the musicians. That's why we were there. And of course, we'd come back home and learn their stuff, and we just kept growing and growing and growing.
So you told me that you had an opportunity to play at the Apollo. Who were you playing with at the Apollo Theater?
Well, the first time we did the Apollo Theater was actually amateur night, me and my brothers and I. And we had our group called JoJo and the Admirers. And we actually came in second place. We thought we were going to come in first place. I mean, the people loved us. But this guy came up there. I don't know if he was from Georgia or not, but he started singing Georgia on My Mind, and the people went wild. So we came in second place, but that was good. But then, you know, went in the military, and I came out and joined the Presidents. And first time I was at the Apollo was with the Presidents. You know, they had to hit 5, 10, 15, 20.
Yeah, I still have that 45.
Do you? I still talk with Tony, the lead singer. Yeah, that was quite an experience, you know, because, you know, I lost my brother in Vietnam. So I wasn't even thinking about playing when I first came out the military. But what happened was Ronnie Mosley, record exec, who was really influential in our lives, he called me, needed a backup band to back up the Presidents. And he said, get a band together. And that's what I did. And we went on out there. And I had a young guitar player, Glenn Goins. I grabbed him, and we just went from there.
So as we go fast forward, when did you meet George Clinton? And how did you become an original member of the Parliament?
See, around that same time, I'm going to say around 63, we were still, you know, we had our group, JoJo and the Admirers, and we were doing a lot of shows. So we would play a lot of shows and dances. Well, the Parliaments were pretty popular at the time, and they were still singing Doo Wop. And they had another group that was pretty popular, Sammy and the Delarks. So we were on a show with George and them one day, and George asked me, hey, you guys want to play with us? We said, sure, why not? Well, we weren't really allowed to go to the barbershop. You know, my parents didn't want us to go there, you know, being religious and all, and there was a lot happening there, but we used to sneak down to the barbershop. Well, anyway, we started going down there and practicing with the Parliaments to the point where George liked us, and we started doing shows, and started doing demos with George. And during that same time, we were playing with the Soul Seekers. We were playing with George and them, and we was actually playing with my mom's group. My brother Frankie was also playing at a church, Christian Temple Church, on Sunday nights, which they would broadcast on WNJR. So we were pretty busy during that time playing for multiple groups.
So how long were you with George Clinton?
Okay, we got with George in '64. And like I said, we toured around. We did a lot of demos with George. We did demos like some of the songs that are prevalent today, like Baby, I Owe You Something Good, Let's Make It Last, things like that. And we played with George, and George, he was going back and forth to Detroit. And he would come, back to Plainfield, because he had the barbershop, the Silk Palace on Plainfield Avenue. And he'd come during the week, do his hair and stuff, but he would always go out to Detroit. Well, next thing you know, I Want to Testify hit. And when I Want to Testify hit, that was around 66, 67. And Fuzzy Haskins, he probably made the wrong time to come to the house. But he came on a Sunday morning. George sent them there to ask my parents if we could go with them to Detroit. And my mother and father said, no, you're not going to Detroit. And we at the time, we were like, why? But at the same time, we had our thing going, because we actually was on the Hall label. We had a record out called Moonlight, which you can hear on YouTube or whatever, and which Frankie had helped produce. A song called Moonlight, Ain't It Funny? So we had just got out of contract with that, and we were looking to do another contract somewhere else with another company. But so we played with George, and the original members at the time then was George, Fuzzy Haskins, Grady, Calvin Simon, and they had a little fella who people don't talk much about, but he was one of the original Parliaments. Larry Fisher was his name. And we just did a lot of shows and stuff like that. And we were with George and them from '64 until '67.
So that was 3 years. So where all did you go? Did you go to Europe during that time? Did you, or you just travel up on the East Coast and you did, like Detroit would be Midwest? Where all did you go? And what were some of the highlights of those gigs?
Well, actually, we didn't do a lot of on the road traveling with George. We pretty much in the metropolitan New York area, Jersey area, Connecticut, things like that. I did most of my traveling was when with the presidents, of course, when I joined the Manhattans, Faith Open Charity, and I can tell you more about that, groups like that. That's when I went abroad.
So when you, so what's give me some highlights of your experience with the Parliaments and Clinton. And you make sure you tell me to make sure we share with our audience about how George and your mother danced up the floor.
Yeah, well, the first thing I can tell you is, I wanted to get my hair done. Back in the day, everybody had a process. So I decided to get my hair done. My brothers, they didn't want theirs, but I went, and the first time I got my hair done, George sat me in the chair. And you remember the Malcolm X movie? You remember when he was set, his hair was on fire?
Yes.
Well, that was me. That was me. And all I could think about was, I said, George, this is too hot. I couldn't take it. He kept telling me, just hold on, it's not straightening. So finally, I got to the point I had water coming out of my eyes. So he washed it out, and he did the best he can. So anyway, he fixed it up. And when I got to the house, and my mother, of all people, she looked at my hair and she said, how come your hair don't look like the rest of the guys' hair look? It was still half nappy and half straight. It took about 2 or 3 other times for it to straighten out.
Oh, my. So,
yeah.
So when George came to you, so your mother really didn't reject your hair. She just wanted to know why it didn't look like everybody else's hair.
Yes. All the guys had the big old wavy hair and everything all straight. Well, mine wasn't looking that way.
I can only imagine it being half and half. So you said about your mother and George dancing at the house?
Well, George and them used to come to the house and they would practice. We would practice the shows in the dining room. That's what we all, even us brothers, we would practice in the dining room, and they would do their routines and things and stuff. And of course, it was on the rug, on the carpet. So my mother started noticing how the carpet was wearing in the spots where we practicing at. And she used to say, "You tell that George and them, they better pay me for my carpet. Look at my rug. My rug is getting wore out." So every time she got,
I mean, but that's good.
the notion, she would always say, "You tell that boy, give me my money for my carpet, because it's wore out."
Now, who was your agent when you and your brother were playing? Who was your agent? Who looked out for your financial interests?
Well, we really, at that time, we were so young, we actually were doing it ourselves. I was trying to learn myself. I mean, Ronnie Mosley was very influential in my career. So I could say Ronnie did a lot financially as far as helping me. Like I said, when we, I'll back up, I'll let you know this. We had the group going. We actually signed with Warner Brother Records in 1967, February. And we was working with Jerry Ragavoy. Actually, we were working with Jerry prior to that, and Jerry decided to sign us to Warner Brothers. So the end of February, we signed with Warner Brother Records to Jerry. And Jerry Ragavoy, he owned the Hit Factory in New York. Well, Ronnie Mosley had hooked that up for us. We got our draft notices on March 30th, 1968, a month later. That was my brother's birthday. And I will never forget the look on my mother's face when she brought the mail in. And from that point, when we realized we were getting drafted, a couple of days later, we got a call from the recruiting officer, asking us, did we want to join the military? Well, of course, we had our careers, so we had no desire to join, but he asked us to come down and talk with him, so which we did. So we went down and we spoke with him, and after he found out we were musically inclined and musicians had done some records and things like that, he advised that we go down to Fort Dix. So Jerry was really kind enough. He wrote a real nice letter for us and talking about our talents and how we would be best suited for special services entertainment. We went down to Fort Dix and we found a talk with a sergeant down there, and everybody assured us we wouldn't have a problem getting into special services. So that's why we ended up joining the Army for 2 years under the 2-year buddy plan. My brother JoJo, he came in a month later, and we all decided we would, get out around the same time to pursue our musical careers. So that and at the time, we found out too, there was another group called the Admirations. So we were JoJo and the Admirers. Then we changed the name to the Admirations, and we found out there was a group called that. So during that time period between signing with Jerry and getting drafted, we were in the process of actually looking for another name. And that's why on the CD that I just released, we call it the Plainfield Admirations into Bags, which was a later group. And that's why we call ourselves the Plainfield Admirations, because we were in the process of trying to look for another name at that time.
So did you end up in the special services in the armed forces?
Well, and that thing is, no, what happened was we did a lot of playing in the military. We played a lot. We had a band in there. Actually, we played at Fort Dix. We played at different venues and things like that. We should have won a contest that we didn't. But we went on down to Fort Polk, Louisiana, which said if you went there, your next stop was Nam. But we did a lot of playing at Fort Polk, Louisiana. I mean, we played for retired colonels party. We played for captains. We played for the NCO club, officers club. We played for the troops, and we did all this. We had a sax player. We had a drummer, a guy, Jimmy Cunningham, who from our hometown sung with us. And we, at the time, thinking that we were going to get special services. But then when orders came down, we got orders for the infantry. And matter of fact, my daughter, the day we got our orders for Vietnam, or let's say graduated, my daughter was born that night. My wife here, she actually went into labor at Newark Airport before we landed.
Oh my.
Yeah, so that kind of put a damper on things. We were actually home for about, say a week and a half. And I was devastated about going to Vietnam, I'll be honest with you, because we knew that was just our careers and everything was on hold. And one day, just before we were supposed to go, coming back from Newark, we went over there to see a cousin of ours. And Frankie turned to me, just he and I were in the car. And he said to me, he says, look, man, you got a wife and child. I'm going to go to Vietnam. If you didn't have a wife and child, you could go to Vietnam, but you don't need to go. You got a wife and child. And it's something I could never say for many years, and I didn't even express this to my wife until 96 when they did the Vietnam Veterans dedication. Relief came over me that I felt so guilty about having that relief, because God knows I didn't want him to go. But he went on to Vietnam. Frankie was the type of guy, he didn't complain. And he ended up in a band over there for a while. In fact, they brought his guitar back. But one of the things he did, which I cherish, is in November of '68, because he went over September 8th of '68. Around November, he wrote us and told us about a song that he had written called Soul Soldier. And we were like, wow. So that song came back in the box. And that song is on the CD, the one we just released, Evolution of Our Music. And I can say, truthfully, that is the last song that he and I wrote together, because I put a few touches on it here and there. But most of the lyrics, when I say most, like 90, 95% are his lyrics. And it came back in the box along with his guitar.
You still have his guitar?
Oh, yes, yes.
And you treasure it?
Yes, he only had 4 strings on it, and at the top of it, it had like a little rope on it. I guess they used to tie. And matter of fact, his sergeant contacted us, and he came to visit me a couple of times, Sergeant Henderson, and he told us how the troops would all gather around Frankie and everything, because he said, that wasn't a good situation, but he said Frankie would soothe their minds just playing and singing and still writing his music.
During that time.
He still wrote his music, played his guitar up until the end, yes.
And as I was reading about an article about you, it says that, Frankie always wanted you to continue your music career, and that's what you're doing even to this day. Now, how many brothers, you keep referring to the brothers, how many brothers did you have?
Me, Frankie, and JoJo.
Okay.
JoJo's the youngest, Frankie in the middle, and I'm the oldest. And that's why I had, because, back in the day, they always said the oldest brother would be the one to go to military. So that was war on my mind for many years, too, me being the oldest. Because, me being the big brother and all, I kind of looked out for my little brothers. And actually, in truth, that's when we never parted until he went to Vietnam. Even when we went in the military, at Fort Dix, we slept side by side. And when we went to Fort Polk, Louisiana, he slept in the top bunk and I was in the lower bunk.
So you were always together?
Always together until he went to Vietnam. We never parted, on the road and everything, always together. Yes, that was our goal, to make our music, to make our mother and father, say they wouldn't have to work anymore, and just, make music our lives. That was it.
So tell me about your career now that after the parliaments, you were with the presidents. Tell me about your career. Fast forward me with your career.
Okay, like I said.
To where you are today. To where you are today.
Okay, when I came out of the military, and like I said, Ronnie Mosley called, and he said that he needed a backup band. So I didn't have a guitar player at the time. And I heard this young band, I heard this young guy playing, and I asked him to come with me, by the name of Glenn Goins, who went on to be very popular in Parliament Funkadelic. And actually, I probably need to say this too, but I'll go back to it. But anyway, we went on and we toured with the presidents. That was up and down the East Coast. We played the Rosebank Theater in Bermuda. You mentioned about a highlight. I got some good highlights for you. But one of the things I will never forget, we actually did a show in Youngstown, Ohio,
Oh my.
and with the presidents. And I remember when we pulled up there. Well, no, we were already there. And what happened was this band pulled up, said Ohio players, you know. And so we had our little amps and everything. These guys started bringing out these great big old amps and things, and I'm looking at them. So I was kind of embarrassed looking at my stuff. So after they put their stuff up there on stage, I went up to the bass player, and I said, you know, I didn't even know who the Ohio players were at the time. I went up to the bass player, and I introduced myself, and he introduced himself as Marshall Rock Jones. And I said, would you mind if I use your bass amp? My wife is, yeah, your bass amp. And you know what he said? Of course you can use it. I couldn't believe, because you know, a lot of people don't want you using this stuff. He allowed me to use his amp, which is a SVT, Ampeg SVT. And I tell you what, when I played that thing, I couldn't wait to get back to Plainfield, New Jersey. I went straight and got me one, and Glenn went and got him the V4 Ampeg. I mean, I thought that was the nicest thing that he could have done. And we stayed in touch through the years, Rock and I did. You know, when he came to Plainfield, he got in touch with me and we hung out, God rest his soul. But I just thought that was the most awesome thing that he allowed me to play on that amp. That actually changed my whole sound. I can truthfully say that was because of Rock Jones from the Ohio Players. He when I saw that amp, he let me play through it. It was like, wow.
Now that's a highlight.
Yes, it is.
That is truly a highlight and a compliment to a member of the Ohio Players on what a caring and sharing group they were.
Oh, yes, yes. I mean, and you know the thing about it, it's so funny because when he would see me, he'd say, oh, bad bass playing Richard. And I used to say, oh, no, you're the one that's bad. He said, oh, no, you bad. And I'm thinking, here's the guy from Ohio Players calling me a bad dude, you know, and I just was like, he was so down to earth. That's what I loved about him, you know, and just, I didn't get to know the other ones like I knew Rock, but yeah. And another highlight, I guess you could say, was, well, and this was prior to that, we were at we played the Cobo Hall in Detroit. And that Isaac Hayes was there on that show, the Presidents, Albert King, Rare Earth was on that show. Well, that's another time we walked in, and you know how large Cobo Hall is.
Yes.
And this was prior to meeting the Ohio Players at that gig. And we looked at that place, and we looked at our small amps, and we were like, no. We ain't bringing our equipment in here. This is crazy. Well, anyway, we ended up, I went up to the bass player and asked him if we could use his amp. He said, well, this is Isaac stuff, man. You got to check with him. Now I got butterflies in my stomach. I could not believe I had to go to Isaac Hayes' dressing room and ask him if I could use his amp. But I did. I went, knocked on the door, and Albert King, he was standing there. He kind of sniggled. And I told him who I was. I was the leader of the President's Band and all and so forth. And he allowed us to use their equipment. He said, no problem. And so that was another time we used their equipment. Well, my wife is saying Stevie Wonder. We opened for Stevie at Williams College, which was nice. And Stevie came out and really complimented us. He gave me his card, though we never pursued it. But one of the highlights of my musical career, played for the 74 Jesse Jackson Black Expo. And I mean, there were, you know, that was like a couple days. We were backing up a group called Second Verse. And Marvin Gaye was there, Kool and the Gang, Larry Graham, Main Ingredients, I forget who all was there. But what happened that night when we were getting ready to come back to Jersey, Lord and behold, I walk in the bookstore there, and Marvin's in there, right?
Marvin Gaye?
Marvin Gaye was in the store, yes. And I walked up to him, and at that time, everybody that was part of the show which I don't even know what happened to mine. We had these like medallions around our neck that said 74. So he saw that I was in the show and everything, and we talked. And come to find out that we were going back on the same flight, which was Piedmont. And so he actually, when we talked a little bit and we exchanged numbers, and when we boarded the plane and got settled, he actually came down and sat with me and wanted to do something with the band and talked and everything. And that was another time. I think that's when he went to Europe or whatever, but that was never pursued. But yeah, I had that was a double-decker airplane. First time I had ever been on a plane that had a top, you know, with people, and his whole entourage was on top. But yeah, we had a great conversation. And so I can truthfully say that I have had some, I never reached the stardom that I guess I wanted to, but I have met so many people and professional people along my way. I mean, Don Kirshner. We did, when I did an album. We did an album with Bags. Actually, when we left, we were the president's cabinet, and so when we left the president's, we hooked up with Jerry Ragavoy again, and Jerry Ragavoy. You might find this funny, but Jerry Ragavoy, his production company was called Ragmar. Well, we were looking for a name for the band. He wanted to call us Rags, but we were like, nah, we didn't like Rags. We just didn't like that name. So he said, well, you guys better come up with a name, or I'm gonna name you. And so we talked about it, and we just decided we were gonna call ourselves Bags. He said, nah, it's all right, but anyway, so that's how we ended up being Bags from that.
Well, you know, as we pursue this conversation, how many? I'm changing the subject. How many guitars do you have, and when did you start collecting guitars?
Well, I started collecting guitars in the '60s, but let me see how many guitars. I'm going to say probably around 15, maybe something like that.
And each one has a history.
Oh yes, yeah. I mean, one of the history is my blue. I got a blue '67 Fender Precision, and that's the one that I got just prior to the military, and that's the one I actually did most of my work with. That one has gone to Europe. I played on a lot of songs with that one. I got a custom. It's called a Renato Custom. Renato out of Pastoral Music. He's made guitars for you name it, Johnny Winters, Kool and the Gang, Kiss, whatever. That's a masterpiece. This one right here, this is a masterpiece. He just made this one for me a couple years ago. But I have a 64 Premier. I got a 72 Mustang bass. I got a 95 Fender jazz bass. I got a 2006, I think, Warwick 6-string. I got a PV 5-string. I could go on and on. I got several guitars, yeah.
So tell me, you have the Plain Field Admirations into Bags. Tell me about this CD.
Okay, that CD is music that has been, we recorded all through the years. Like I said, I See a Cloud, which was one of the songs that we recorded prior to going into the military, and that was going to be on the Warner Brothers album. And then, of course, Soul Soldier is on there, the song Frankie wrote in Vietnam. Now, there's other songs on there like Beautiful Birds and Hey Girl that we wrote, and Glenn Goins, of course, who went on with Parliament. That was done at the Hit Factory. So, and then there's a song on there. In fact, the first song is Stone to the Bone, which we had signed with the Kirshner label. It didn't pan out, but we did a lot of songs with the Kirshner label during that time. And I had Jeff Dudley, who was an awesome guitar player, and I can tell you about the guitar players later to come out of Plainfield. But that song is one of my favorites, and I just had all this wealth of material. And all through the years, when people hear it, they would say, man, you need to release this stuff. You need to release this stuff. But of course, you know, I just procrastinated. And finally, my wife's giving me a look here. So finally, she kept telling me, you need to go ahead and release it. Everybody, I said, you know, I got to do it. So I found a studio here that really, Stay Tuned Studios, Don, and he did a great job in mastering it for me. And, you know, I had to get some clearances and things like that. But that's how that came about. It's just a wealth of material that has accumulated all through the years from 1964 all the way up to the present. And then, of course, the latest song on there is the one called Funky Rock that my wife and she helped me write the lyrics to that. So that's probably the latest one I did on that CD. But it's just a wealth of information.
So tell me about what your music career is like now. What are you doing now?
Well, of course, you know, I play for my church. I play for the Juvenile Missionary Baptist, loving that. With the group Straight Up, I have some projects going on. I'm trying to get the CD to be marketed over in Europe and Spain. I'm working on that. I'm working on a project with a single artist, Eric Witherspoon, who's trying to, you know, get his music out. So I've been working with some stuff with him. And just, you know, I work with different artists, you know, sit in with different bands and things like that. And working on a book that my wife is going to give me a look, but I've actually been working on this book for the last 50 years, 40 years, or what have you. But, and I do plan, honey, I do plan on finishing it, of our life story, because I feel like the world needs to hear it.
Tell me 3 things that you would want people to know about your music career. 3 things that you want to highlight in your musical career.
Well, and like I said, one of the things, one of the greatest compliments for me was when Ronnie Mosley asked me to put a band together to go to England to play at Ronnie Scott's at an RCA showcase gig. These were all RCA artists, and Faith, Hope, and Charity. They had the record out To Each His Own, and they needed a backup band. And he called me. And at the time, I said, well, you know, I need to talk with the fellas about it. And Ronnie said, well, aren't you the band leader? I said, well, yeah. He said, well, then why you need to talk with the fellas? Either you're going to do it or not. I said, well, yeah, I'll do it. And lo and behold, we ended up going over there, and like I said, we were on that show with Hall & Oates, the No Rating Band. Got to meet Peter Banks from Yes, who asked me to stay over and form a band with him. So I would say that was a great highlight. Another highlight was really when I was contacted by Bass Player magazine, and they did an article on the P-Funk bassist. That one came out, that was July 2005, and that featured all the bass players who ever played with Parliament Funkadelic. And then lo and behold, they contacted me again for the December issue of Funk Legends and R&B. And that was, to me, that was one of the greatest compliments, because I'm in that magazine with people like Flea from Chili Peppers and Bootsy and Victor Wooten, and I cannot say enough about my good friend who's gone now, Bob Babbitt. He was probably, for me, one of the most influential bass players in my life. I tell you a story when I had bags and we were recording at the Hit Factory. This bass player was there, and I didn't even know him at the time who he was, but he needed a ride one night to Bound Brook where he was living. And I brought him home one night, and I went in his house, and I saw all these records on the wall and stuff, and I realized he was Bob Babbitt, the guy that made War, Midnight Train to Georgia, Scorpio, and all. I had no idea it was him. But he and we stayed friends up until he left here. He and he called me. He would send me books. He would send me all kind of memorabilia. And one of the stories is a funny story. They did a Motown review in Orlando. That's been a few years back now. I was so excited that he invited me as a special guest. I was so excited when we got there to the hotel, I forget the name of it, I was so excited, I couldn't wait to get in there. I ran into a fence, the car. Yeah, I ran into the fence. I was so excited. The fence was in front of me. I wanted to stop and get in there, so I ran right into the fence. I had that mark from the fence on the van for a long time. Yeah, I was so excited just to get in there with him. But he was very influential in my life, yes.
Tell me, can you share with us an embarrassing moment on playing at some arena, something that went completely haywire, but yet you recovered, but you always remember it?
Well, I will always remember, like I said, when we played on Isaac Hayes' equipment, and apparently they were doing sound check while we were playing, performing, and everything went out for about 10, 15 seconds. And that was like, whoa, what's happening here? We were hoping that it wasn't done intentionally, but we know, and they apologized, but it was like, oh no, right in the middle of the show, it kind of went out. It's like we were like, yeah, like not singing. And my wife reminded me it happened in New York, but we actually played a gig at Plain for High School, and we think this was bags. And actually, we think somebody went and pulled the plug on our equipment because our roadie, he went back and said, man, somebody pulled the plug on y'all. He didn't plug it back in, but we kept rolling.
But you know, that's the art of being a professional.
Yeah.
Yeah. I wanted to, you know, we're working so hard in Dayton, Ohio, under the directorship, the president and CEO of the Funk Music Hall of Fame and Exhibition Centers. And we're trying so hard to get the Funk Center here in Dayton, Ohio. Could you express why you believe this is so important for us to have the Funk Music Hall of Fame here in Dayton, Ohio?
Well, you know, I mean, Dayton, Ohio, let's face it, they are the home of funk. I mean, you know, Slave, Ohio Players, what have you. I mean, it's long overdue. I mean, we as funk players, we need a setting. We need a home. I mean, the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame is fine, not knocking that. But funk, when it revolutionized, it changed the whole music industry. It became another whole genre. So that needs to be exposed to the world. And what you guys are doing, you are exposing it to the world, to people who may not realize the importance of the funk and where it come from, its origin, and where it's at today, and how many people have come through that road to make it what it is today. And I praise you guys for doing a fantastic job, keeping it alive, keeping it rolling, and it can't do nothing but just go higher and higher up. Yeah, I mean, it's just awesome. And I'm thrilled and honored to be a part of this.
Well, one of the things, you know, David Webb works day and night to keep it alive, and we're so happy to have you on the show. But I'm real special, and so because I think I'm really kind of a little special, I want you to sing to me a little bit about Let's Stay Together, because the title of this article I was reading about was called Let's Stay Together. Tell me the origin behind Let's Stay Together, and then I want you to break out and sing a little bit to me about Let's Stay Together.
Well, and you know, I didn't mention this earlier, but you know, when I said with the admirations, you know, we had all the players played with us. They were our musicians first. Eddie Hazel, you probably know the story. He's gone down in history as one of the guitar solos of all time. Gary Scheider, the Water Diaper, Tal Ross, all of those guys, they played with us. Boogie Mawson, and Frankie was instrumental in showing them and teaching them chords. So I'm probably getting off the subject, but I just wanted to mention that. And of course, great bass players like Billy Bass Nelson and all those guys. We knew those guys when they were, you know, just starting out. So that was the blessing to see them grow into what they've done today and the impact they have had on the funk industry, the music industry, and the whole funk genre. It's been phenomenal. Yeah, but Let's Stay Together was, well, I got a call from my newspaper here in town, and I don't know how they contacted me, and they said, we want to do an article. We heard about you and your brother and your music career and all, and I pretty much told them the story about us, and I told them how my brother and I, we never parted, and until this day, and of course they were really mesmerized with Soul Soldier. They just thought that was really awesome that that song came back in the box, and I was able to put my spin on it and put it on the CD. So that's where the Let's Stay Together come about, because it's like, even though Frankie's gone and I'm still here, that song put us back together.
So let me hear it.
I'm so in love with you. Whatever you want to do is all right with me. 'Cause you make me feel so brand new. I want to spend my life with you.
Wow.
I probably pitched it a little bit too high, but
No, that was really good. It puts Al Green to shame. What about, can you give me a little bit about Soul Soldier?
yeah, Soul Soldier, again, you know, Frankie talked about his plight in Vietnam. He talked about what he was going through. He had to go through a lot over there. And so that song is very special, because that song came from his heart. And you know, if you want, I'll sing a little bit of it. But that was a song that came from him. And when he was telling us about it, we all felt that. We just felt the whole vibe, because, you know, it says, with my gun at my side, a foxhole to hide. What can I do but think about her? My girl on my mind, myself in a bind. What can I do but think about her? I know I've got another year to fight. I want to hold her so tight. Back home, I hope my girl is doing all right. Hope she's all right. I think about her every night. I'm a soul soldier, fighting in the army and in love. Soul soldier, I got to keep my faith in the Lord above.
Thank you. Thank you so very much. I just want to take the opportunity to thank you, Richard, for sharing your stories with us, and that we wish you the best. And
Thank you.
we will look forward to your donation to the Funk
Yes.
Music Hall of Fame and Exhibition Center.
Yes, ma'am.
And we really appreciate this opportunity. So with that, I'm going to say this is Rhine McLin for the Funk Music Hall of Fame and Exhibition Center's Funk Chronicles. Until the next time, keep it funky.
I see a cloud from where I stand. Sun comes up, then goes down. Baby, that's what makes the world go round. Beautiful birds are singing, coming in my ear. Oh Lord, there's a ray of sunlight. Soldier, fighting in the army.